Good morning, everybody. It's Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio, 26th of May, 2013. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful week. I hope that you are getting as good a news as I am about potentially disastrous situations. Health all seems to be going well, to say the least. And I count myself as halfway through the grueling regimen of having chemical Cossacks right all the way through my body, looking for all fast-growing cells. Fortunately, that does not seem to be my frontal lobe at the moment, which is most excellent. Although hair is even more scant than normal, which is fine. And so it's fine. It's fine. I'm happy to be getting this all behind me, and thanks to everyone who's given me good wishes. Just wanted to point out for those who think, oh, it's all done and better. Well, not quite. It's about a 5-year cycle to make sure that this kind of ailment is truly behind you. And of course, there are some increased risks later on in life. So it's never exactly fully behind you, but boy, it's about as good a news as I could be getting throughout this whole process. So thanks to everyone for your support and your kind wishes. I am moved to tears every day by all the love that's coming in, and I just really want to thank you and tell you how much that really does mean to me. It's wonderful. It's a great community. I really, really appreciate it. So it was interesting. So I was talking to Isabella about a man named Jesus, and we were talking about people who could do mean things to you, or people who might do mean things to you. And she said to me, because I asked her, I said, you haven't actually had anyone ever do anything mean to you? And she said, no, she's not had anyone do anything mean to her, which I think is a pretty, a pretty great place to be, pushing on a half decade with no meanness, which I think is wonderful. And so we were talking about Jesus, because we were talking about two different approaches to people who do things who are mean to you. And one is called an eye for an eye, which is you pay back unkindness with unkindness, and the other is called turn the other cheek, which is where you moon people. No, wait. No, that's more Old Testament. The New Testament is where you repay unkindness with kindness. And we were talking about that. And the conclusion that she came to was that if people have generally been nice to you, then, if they're just having a bad day or they're kind of grumpy, then you can go and give them a hug and a kiss and make them feel better. But if people are generally not kind to you, that's not a very positive strategy. So it was a very interesting chat about how to deal with unkind people. And boy, I'm really seduced, and it is a very seductive idea to think that if you do nice to people who harm you, that you are going to turn them around, and you are going to make them better people, and you are going to awaken their innate kindness and empathy that is buried deep beneath them. Of course, as everyone knows, I am a slave to science as much as possible. Science is the philosophy of inanimate objects. We are the philosophy of animate objects with choice, but science is the philosophy applied to inanimate objects. But the science of the brain seems to be quite powerful and quite incontrovertible, that the development of empathy is, close to a dozen highly complex brain systems that all need to work in concert. And I would make the argument, I think The Science of Evil by Borat's cousin is a book that is well worth reading about this. And I would argue that learning empathy is more complex and more difficult than learning Japanese. And so for me, at least this is sort of my working model view of empathy, that if you grow up learning Japanese, then you speak Japanese, and there's no problem, because it's easy peasy, nice and easy. And so these are the people who've grown up with empathy in their lives. Now, if you've not grown up learning Japanese, then it is, let's just say you've grown up learning some waspy language like English or Gaelic, then if you're going to go and learn Japanese, this is a huge amount of work. It's like at least probably, I don't know, about half a decade of pretty consistent labor to become generally and genuinely fluent, like to the point where you can completely master Japanese. It's a huge amount of work. Now, the idea that you repay unkindness with kindness, and then that teaches people empathy, to me would be like somebody who doesn't speak Japanese, and you just simply speak Japanese to them, and somehow they'll learn Japanese. I don't see how that can transfer, right? simply like showing someone or mirroring a behavior that you want in others does not teach them how to achieve that behavior, does not create the brain systems that are necessary for genuine empathy. So I think just repaying unkindness with kindness is like saying to someone, well, the best way to learn Japanese is just, go and turn on some Japanese channel on TV and just keep watching it until you know Japanese. Well, it's not going to work that way. I think we all understand that it's really a consciously applied system of study with a huge amount of work and practice and failures, mistakes, problems, and so on. And so I view empathy as it's an analogy, right? And it's not an exact one because the reality is that learning empathy is much harder than learning Japanese, because learning Japanese has no moral content, no moral problem to it, right? I mean, if you grew up without empathy, then that was because of deficiencies in your environment and in your upbringing. I mean, significant moral deficiencies. And also, you have probably acted in such a way. If you don't have empathy, you've acted in a way that's been quite harmful and destructive to other people. So once you start learning empathy, it becomes a huge problem. Looking back upon your childhood, looking back upon the harm you've done to others, and you are probably embedded in a whole bunch of relationships that are mutually exploitive or destructive, or at least kind of callous, cold, and who cares kind of stuff. And so if you go learn Japanese, you don't have to reevaluate all your relationships. If you go learn Japanese, it doesn't show you in a ghastly moral light. If you go and learn Japanese, it doesn't expose you to the agonies of your early history. So when I sort of view people who don't have empathy, and again, I'm trying to be as scientifically consistent as possible. And as far as I understand it, nobody's found a way. Even lots of ways to learn Japanese. In fact, there's a whole contingent of FDR listeners who are going through the process of turning Japanese. I really no. Mike's here. He's like he's giving me the scroll by as if the jokes that work or not. And anyway, but they're learning Japanese, which is really a fascinating process and something which I quite envy. Me, my entire language system is based upon learning computer languages and fairly potent analogies, but not at all to do with learning other human languages. Computer languages and philosophy, yes. Other human languages, I'm just wretched at. But they're all learning Japanese, and I think that's just fantastic. But I don't think that anyone's ever been able to find a way to teach somebody empathy, and because you did these brain systems that need to be created during particular phases of development among infants and toddlers and young children, I don't think that there's any way. Like, it's like that language window. Like, if you don't learn language between the age of sort of 2 and 5, you're always going to struggle with it, and you're never going to develop it. It's a particular phase of development that needs to be there. They've not found a way to be able to replicate it later. Maybe they will one day. And then, they can inject you with something that makes you empathetic, and hopefully then they'll be able to inject something with you that makes you speak Japanese, so I can finally understand these kabuki bizarre game shows that they have. And so I just wanted to we were talking quite a bit about this idea that you can't, I mean, Izzy and I were talking quite a bit about this idea that you can't just make people nice by showing them what nice looks like. I think that's like, you can't learn how to figure skate by watching people figure skate. I mean, you just can't. You just simply can't do that. And again, these things are much easier than learning empathy. And so I just wanted to mention that at the beginning. And the second thing I wanted to mention was that somebody had written on the message board. I believe that there may be a thread to do with determinism going on the message board. And somebody put, I think, something quite interesting about how, let me just see if I can, I'm just going to see if I can find the quote. Do you remember we were talking, Boo, about how some people think that everyone's like a rock? Yeah. And that was not exactly where I'm coming from. So he says here, I think it's interesting. If the free market is valid, which I believe it is, then a business that provides no value to anyone cannot and will not survive. The market itself will be shut down instead of governance. I don't know about that second sentence, but likewise, if a topic provides no value to anyone, it cannot and will not continue being discussed, also without the need for governance. Whether or not a business in the free market has value is not determined by one person, or even a governance of persons. It is likewise not determined by the validity of the product. The value of the business in the free market is determined only by the market that continues it. I am against this ban because it is consistent with belief in the validity of the free market to be against it. So if I understand this correctly, the idea is that, well, I'm into the free market, and therefore I should not say to people, do not discuss determinism on the message board, which I have said for many years because for a variety of reasons that I've talked about before. But I do genuinely believe and accept that determinism is not a valid topic for philosophy. The reason simply being, I mean, this is almost praxeologically, that if determinism is true, then there's no such thing as philosophy. There's only physics, right? Then, if determinism is true, and we are, merely atoms and matter fulfilling the inevitable laws of physics, then there is no such thing as philosophy. There is only physics. And this would be, human choice would be something that would not be studied as other than a prior delusion, right? In the same way that we may study people's belief in Thor, but we would not say that this proves the existence of Thor. We would view it as a historical anomaly. And so for me, if you have a club studying Japanese and someone wants to come in and talk about penguins, then people are going to say, well, sorry, this is a club for studying Japanese and not penguins. Similarly, if I go into a convenience store and I ask to buy a car, they're going to say, well, that's not our product here. We don't do that here. And if I just sit there and stand around and say, but I really want a car, I need a car, and interrupt and interfere with everyone, then of course the store owner is going to say, this is not what we're doing here. If determinism is true, then, I mean, of course, everything that I've talked about in terms of the show here, right? The Free Domain Radio has always been the logic of personal and political liberty, right? Freedom, choice, right? If determinism is valid, well, then there's no such thing as true or untrue, valid or invalid. But it means that everything that I've certainly been doing and everything that every other philosopher has ever been doing has been a complete lie and a fraud. It doesn't mean that we've been lying and being fraudulent. It simply means that we're ridiculously and it's been a religion, right? If determinism is true, then all philosophy has been fundamentally religious, superstitious, and the making up of characteristics like deities and souls which simply don't exist, i.e. free will. So given that it is a philosophy message board and determinism would eliminate philosophy and turn the study of human action into a subset of physics, or perhaps even biology or neuroscience perhaps, then, well, it's a philosophy forum. And therefore, to talk about determinism is to come to a philosophy forum to talk about the opposite of philosophy. And so I just wanted to point out that the free market as a whole is important, of course. I'm a big fan of the free market, but it's not. And I'm happy. I don't actually mind too much, and I have recently talked about determinism live with people, but I just don't. I'm just not going to do it in terms of the forum. It's just philosophy is a spoken discipline. It is not something that writing is not bad for exchanging information, but philosophy is a spoken discipline. I just really want to point that out. It's a very, very important characteristic of philosophy. To get to the truth is a very tricky thing, and the forum is not a great way to have intense philosophical discussions. It's not bad for exchanging information, providing links, and putting out some arguments and so on. But it's not a great environment at all, which is why I do suggest to people who have questions about UPB or determinism and so on, we'll talk about it. It's a much, much better way because you can actually sort of challenge definitions and get progress going pretty quickly. Anyway, so that's it for my introduction. Thank you so much for your indulgence and your kindness, as always. Just to remind you, for those who don't make it to the very tail end of the grueling Mormon-length Sunday show, fdrurl.com/donate if you would like to help out. I would really, really appreciate that. It's always gratefully accepted and most necessary. And thanks again to Mike for coming up with these great these sort of end videos for the shows, which people can actually click on and donate and get to various videos right away. He's just doing some great stuff with YouTube, so thanks so much to him. And now, James, if we would like to bring up caller numero uno, I will maybe do the rest of the show in Japanese.